Minister S. JAISHANKAR is scheduled to address the UN today at around 8:30 p.m. We will be cutting live to that as soon as his address begins. We earlier saw that India had rebuked Pakistan as well at UNGA over its remarks on Kashmir. And Jaishankar's address also comes at a time when tensions have escalated in the Middle East, and Prime Minister earlier also pertaining to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, the PM has also called upon both the countries for dialogue and diplomacy. So a lot of issues that are emerging, whether these will find their mention in the External Affairs Minister's address. Meanwhile, also another important point to be mentioned is that several countries, global powers, have backed India's bid for permanent membership in the UNSC. I'm being joined by our guests this evening, Dr. Shubhda Chaudhary, Foreign Affairs expert, and Rajiv Nayan, Senior Research Associate. I would like to go across to Dr. Shubhda Chaudhary first. Dr. Shubhda, what can we expect for the External Affairs Minister's focal point of address to be in this address at the UN?
Thank you so much for calling me. The first thing is that our External Affairs Minister has been trying very, very hard to be the voice of the Global South. The entire idea of talking about BIMSTEC, talking about how India can play a pivotal role in that is very integral right now. If we look at India's Near East or Look East policy, it is important and nostalgic of the spice route that was prevalent between Southeast Asia, through Middle East, West Asia to Europe, which was there, a remnant of it, which India tried to produce with IMEC. Now bringing Thailand, Myanmar, and all the neighboring countries of the Bay of Bengal, which has more than 3 to 4 trillion economy business, is a very essential part for India. It is essential because it will improve the diaspora, people-to-people trades, the trade and free trade access between these countries, and give more hegemony to India in South Asia, specifically, when comparatively with SAARC. So that is something which we should look forward to. And at this point of so much of upheaval, be it the Russia-Ukraine crisis or what is going on in West Asia, our foreign minister has been trying very, very hard to give a policy which is strategic, diplomatic, and peaceful, a peaceful intervention. So India can play a very, very, very strong role at global politics right now.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Shubhda, for that. Continue to stay with us. I'm also going across to our guest, Rajiv Nayan, a Senior Research Associate. Rajiv, there have been support coming in from global powers for India's permanent membership at the UNSC. Do you think this will find a mention in the External Affairs Minister's address?
Look, this has been our policy, and the world, in fact, has been looking towards the reforms of the Security Council and United Nations in general. And it is expected that, yes, different other countries, including India, will discuss about it, at least will mention it, about reforms in Security Council and India's membership of it. So we can expect, but actually other countries should speak about the membership of India. India has been putting forward its candidature for a long period. So of course it will again articulate, but it will not just say that please give me the membership. It is a really strong candidate. What it may do, that it will just express its different, express its vision, articulate its vision, and say that what all it is doing for global peace, global development, and the contribution it is making to United Nations peacekeeping and many other such organizations and initiatives undertaken by the United Nations and and different international fora. And it has been acting very responsibly, and it is now considered a responsible nuclear country. And it is, you have just mentioned about Ukrainian crisis, the Ukraine-Russia conflict, the role it has played and the way world is looking towards it. And as gradually the world, and even the Western powers are realizing the significance of India and significance of India's position on the issue. Earlier, they were slightly skeptical and critical. But now they are saying, even Zelensky has maintained, and he has also stated that India can bring peace in the region. So this is how this is an elevated, changed status, you can say position of India in the international system. So yes, he may mention, or even if he doesn't mention, its candidature is there, very much there. For last more than 20 years, India has been lobbying for it. And the world knows. And except a few countries, all feel that yes, India deserves the membership. If you don't include India into it, then this body will lose its legitimacy. And in fact, recently, Kishore Mahbubani had written a very good piece, excellent piece rather, and in which he just projected how the world had changed and what was the world during the formation of United Nations, and when the Security Council was appended to it, or it was made a part of the General Assembly or General United Nations, and what is the world today, and where India stands, the third largest economy, fifth largest, but it is going to become the third largest economy of the world, and it has got its own stature in the world. So if you ignore it, then today or tomorrow this body will collapse or will become non-functional. And because it is becoming non-functional, you are finding many groupings coming in, many groupings emerging, ranging from Quad to G20 to G7 to many others you can name. So this is the situation. So that again, I'll just conclude by saying that now the world has to decide whether it wants to save this body or not. India has, of course, expressed its willingness to take up this responsibility, and the world has to decide. If it doesn't decide, then the fate of this universal organization, body, whatever we call it, will be at peril. Back to you.
A question to both Dr. Shubhda and Rajiv Nayan is that in the past 2 to 3 days, we have seen a lot of countries criticize the UN itself and even question the relevance of the United Nations in these drastically changing times. And the question, of course, has been on the relevance of the United Nations. In fact, within the UN itself, we have seen the UNGA criticize and question the UNSC itself. And then we saw Israeli leadership, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, put up those maps where on the one hand he shows India as a blessing and then another map that shows Iran as a curse. This entire series of events really hints at the world acknowledging that there needs to be changes. India has been pushing for reforms, particularly very loudly and clearly within the UN. So, how does this amplify, and how likely is it to amplify India's call for reforms in the United Nations, given the series of events in the past 2 to 3 days?
Who will start first? Sorry.
Rajiv,
Yeah,
Rajiv, yes, you can go ahead.
No, I'm saying that, yes, you are quite right. And the map, the way even Israel is challenging the inefficiency of United Nations, and the world has to just acknowledge it. On the other hand, India has been acting responsibly and playing its role to strengthen the body. It has been playing in its role, or a very constructive role, in almost all the organs of the United Nations, all the bodies, and even other international organizations, starting from International Atomic Energy Agency to OPCW and many other, in many organizations, international organizations. We must pray. I say pray, because the world doesn't listen to what all the same voices are coming emanating from different parts of the world. We must pray that this universal body, which has got its own role despite all the limitations, all its inefficiency, all its problems, and this body must survive, because this is at least a forum where the international community, almost all the countries of the world, at least ventilate, or you can say articulate their vision of the world or their problems or what they are facing. At least they sit together, try to implement the agenda agreed upon in the General Assembly. If this body doesn't cease to exist, then we'll have a very critical situation, precarious situation existing in the international system, which is already facing a serious crisis. So at least this could be a body, a forum to resolve some of the crises. Many of the agendas are not getting implemented. Some are being ignored. Some are simply just dismissed, as Israel is doing. So in this situation, I think now the world has to sit together and think about how to strengthen this body. And if it is not strengthened, still they are living in a world just after the Second World War, then I think there will be serious problems. The world has to think afresh. If they don't think afresh, they don't realize the changed reality and how to solve it. Otherwise, what will happen? People will start moving to other bodies like FATF. Now, FATF is considered to be a very efficient body, more effective body than United Nations. So some this kind of bodies will be taking up the role of United Nations. If United Nations wants to save its stature, its position, and then I think the time has come for the international community, all its members, to act on it. So over to you.
Dr. Shubhda, back to you with the same question.
So understanding UNSC or understanding UNGA, we have to look at three basic parameters. The first is, how is the funding of UN carried out? So the primary funder is United States, followed by China. Second, United Nations itself, it is a very, very, as Sir said, a universal body which needs to evolve with time. Different kinds of conflicts or debates within the member states is a good thing, because that is how evolution of discourse takes place. But the second thing is that all these actors, who are part of United Nations, they are socio-economically asymmetrical in terms of their power balance, in terms of their history, in terms of their independence, culture, ethnicity, and so many. Most of them are post-colonial countries. So there is a certain kind of asymmetry of power within the member states of UN. Third, and most importantly, UN cannot stop a war because there are international laws and the jurisdiction of it. It can provide relief, it can help solving the refugee crisis, it can help in mediation, it can help its peacekeeping forces, like a lot of Indian army men are also deployed at the Golan Heights, for example, in the UN peacekeeping forces. So it can do that. It cannot strategically stop a war. That is one of the reasons why the Russia-Ukraine conflict or Israeli invasion or genocide in Gaza has become, a business model that continues. What UN needs to do now, along with, giving the importance to India, because India right now is at that stage with our diaspora, with our trade, with our capacity of peace negotiations and the history of it, and with our lineage of being non-aligned, no matter how much CIA or Soviet Union tried to intervene in it in the 1960s and 70s. The fact is, India is a very geostrategic choke point for maritime trade, for security, for technological import-export, and specifically because of the intelligence, the human intelligence that we provide. So UN needs to take category of it. But again, because of the veto power, because of the different kinds of power dynamics, the Chinese hegemony, and so many other facts, we are not getting, even though the French president is supporting us, and he's supporting many other countries. So as Sir said, We definitely should not ask for it. Other countries should rally behind it. We have this power right now at the international platform to create a moment in history in terms of peace negotiation, in terms of solving the refugee crisis that no other country has because of our diaspora, historic relations, and ethnic relations. UN needs to take cognizance of this fact. But again, the internal power dynamics of UN makes it a structural weakness from within. So we have to create, or UN has to create various reforms through which it can cater to this, because there is a civil war happening in Sudan. There is an entire skirmish happening in Kenya. Most of the countries are volatile right now. And we need a torchbearer, a guidance, a very strong voice in international relations, which is not, subservient to the market forces and only to some kind of hegemonic trend. And India is there to solve the solution, to create the solution, to create a new discourse. And this is a very, very important for India in historic time frame.
Dr. Shubhda, another question, going further on the point that you just made right now, is that Israel is battling terror from two sides, and India too has its own battles with terrorism from across the border from Pakistan. And we saw this showdown at the UNGA as well, after the Pakistani Prime Minister made comments about Kashmir, and then India hit back at him, rightly so. Do these situations, global situations that are unfolding in the Middle East, and what India is witnessing, what with the statements coming in from terror-sponsoring states like Pakistan, would it be right to read that this provides us an opportunity to draw the parallel and to draw the attention of the West as to we also have a fight against terror, just like Israel does, just like Israel's fight situation, geopolitical situation is being understood. India deserves that as well, and attention must be drawn to it. Attention specifically on Pakistan's sponsorship of cross-border terrorism.
So there are two answers to it. First, the West will do when it pleases its own foreign policy. It will not do any kind of support or change of its foreign policy just because India needs it. US, you remember, was in cahoots with Pakistan, and then after 9/11 shifted towards India. It was a diplomatic maneuver when it served their interests. Second, contextualizing what is happening in Israel, Lebanon, with what is happening in India, Pakistan would not be very correct, because we have different histories, geographies, post-colonial histories, and different kinds of, ethnic, religious diversity. But at the same time, I think this is going to be, specifically in UN, when there's a very anti-Israel rhetoric right now, India, if it continues with its policy of non-alignment and peace mediation, it will be the best example in foreign policy, to not draw the attention that, look, we also have neighbors that are inducing terror. But look how we solve it without a genocide. Look how we solve it diplomatically. That is the example, that is the beauty, that is the power of diplomacy that no one can take away from India. And Jaishankar has been working very, very hardly, because irrespective of so many debates about George Soros and, the American ambassador in India, in spite of so many things, we have tried to be very, very objective, not rash, not impulsive. That is the history of India's entire identity. So right. This is my answer for that.
Right. Rajiv, coming to you with a question on now pertaining to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. India, like Dr. Shubhda said, the policy of non-alignment and very close bilateral ties with either sides, with the US, with Europe, with Russia, with Ukraine. India is being looked up to for peace mediation, to bring all parties to the talking table. How is that, do you think, going to elevate India's position at the UN? In fact, would it rather elevate India's position at the UN, and to what extent? Do you see that allowing India or making way for India's pitch for UNSC any stronger?
Oh, well, I just talked about UN India's membership of United Nations Security Council, and also I talked about India deserves it. Now, whether it takes up these issues or not, in fact, it has been taking up all these issues, and in a very objective and on the basis of merit. Recently, Prime Minister very correctly pointed out that we were not Tatast, means we were not neutral. Many times what happens, people neutral in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Tatast or neutral, both have got meanings in international relations. This is not based on merit. And it has got history. The term has got history. The PM very categorically dismissed that it has been neutral in the conflict. It has been articulating India has been articulating its position on the conflict, that sovereignty and integrity of a nation must be respected. Dialogue is the only method. And before that also, Prime Minister told even Putin straight away, point blank on his face, this is not an age of war. So India has been taking a very positive position without caring for whether it is a balanced position, whether it is a non-aligned position, or whether it is a position, many said neutral, but I clarified, or whether it is pro-Russia, pro-Ukraine, balancing position. So all these have got demerits. So India has been taking the position on the basis of merit. That this is what is required, and it also this is a very complex history involved in Ukraine-Russia conflicts. So those historical factors, those historical forces, features, whatever you call it, may be addressed separately, gradually, incrementally. Those may be addressed, and this is the way to address such complex historical narratives. And it is very they have got very complex past. So I think both Russia and Ukraine have to remember that force is not the way, war is not the way to somehow resolve this intricate historical issues, nationalist issues. There are many places which are cultural centers of that part of the world. It has been agriculturally very rich country or region, you can say. So many factors are there. So this is, and India has been realizing, underlining the complex reality and the way to endeavor. Now coming to the second issue, should India do mediation? And India has made it very clear, and Prime Minister Modi has also made it clear that it wants peace. And whatever it can contribute to bringing about peace, it will do it. So, but first condition is that both parties should agree to end the war. Only then India can do anything. Plus, all have got their own conditions, preconditions. So, India doesn't have the force to end the war. Basically, the war is to be ended by the two countries. India can only appeal to end the war, and whatever grievances, whatever the problems they have got, that those problems may be solved sitting across the table. And at this stage, India can provide a forum that, okay, both countries can come and both you have to talk. And here India can help the two countries. It cannot help in stopping the war. But its position is now well appreciated. Initially, even Japan had supported Indian position, which is considered to be a very close ally, friend, partner, whatever you call of Western countries. So they did not like it. But the fact is that not only even India, US allies, but other countries, the countries of the global south, if you read their position, you will find that they all are echoing India's position on the conflict.
Right.
So this is the leadership of India which it has been showing. Now I am coming to the 2 points which you raised for Dr. Chaudhary. First is about Pakistan. Now Pakistan is now nowhere in the international politics in discourse, even in the United States. People have forgotten an entity called Pakistan, which always created nuisance for the world.
Right.
It harbored terrorism, international terrorists. So and now it is economically struggling, struggling for its survival. Economic breakdown is appearing to be quite imminent. And in the United States, if you talk to people who are living there or in other Western capitals, you will find that they say, oh, Pakistan, yes, is that Talibani country or the country which always blackmailed the world through its nuclear weapons. So it has either disappeared or is just remembered for all wrong things.
Right,
So
Rajiv, I would
India
like to.
doesn't-
I have to
Sorry.
interrupt you there, Rajiv. We are running short of time. I would like to thank you, Rajiv Dayan and Dr. Shubhada Chaudhary, for those insights as we wait for Dr. S. Jaishankar's address at the UNGA in a short while.